So you're an amateur photographer, a hobbyist. You maybe do the occasional paid gig as a side hustle, and you're thinking about whether you should really go pro. You know your work's good enough, so should you? So okay, let's get straight to it. I thought it would be more appropriate to give you a little bit of background about myself and my own situation so you could at least contextualise where I'm coming from when I tell you these things. So I've even made some notes, which was really unusual for me. Normally I just talk directly to you from what comes into my head. I am not a full-time professional photographer. I have a studio. I charge people for work, but it's a side thing for me. Now, how I ended up like this is I have another job. I'm an independent financial advisor based in the northeast of England. Now, on the side, my photography was growing to a level where I wanted to have some studio space of my own. I was sick of hiring studio space, humping gear all over the place. So I'd already been doing a little bit of charging for work on the side, putting myself out there as a professional photographer, advertising, promoting, etc., in order to cover the costs of having the studio space rather than covering it directly from my pocket. Going down that road, I also thought that when I get a bit older and I'm ready to retire or semi-retire, the business is already set up as a photographer, I could do that as a thing to keep myself occupied, keep myself busy once I'm actually ready to leave being an independent financial advisor. Now, on that journey, there were a few things that have made me think, and a few issues I've had that I think are really pertinent to anybody who's considering going professional from being an enthusiastic hobbyist. Always start with the positives. So you're probably thinking about going professional because there's a few things that you think would be better if you were actually doing this full time. The first thing is you get to buy the gear you want when you want and say it's for business purposes. And you think that'll be an awful lot easier with your partner when you're spending thousands of pounds on gear. You want to be your own boss. You don't want to have people tell you what to do. Particularly pertinent if you're in an employed position at the moment. And ultimately, though, you want to spend as much time as possible doing what you love to do. Taking images, editing images, presenting images. And they're all fantastic things. But does becoming professional actually allow you to do those things more so than remaining a hobbyist or an enthusiast photographer? The cons, the bad things. Now, if you are going to go professional, don't think that you're going to spend all of your time taking photographs, making images, editing images, etc. Because you won't. You'll spend just as much time, if not more time, building and promoting the business. I'm talking to you now in December 2021, just before Christmas. In November and December 2021, I did 15 sessions in November and 6 sessions in December, and I ended December early because I wasn't going to put myself under the pressure of having prints ready for clients in time for Christmas. So that's as a side position. So that's plenty of work. In fact, it's possibly too much. How did I get to that position? By putting more time into actually promoting, building and running the business than actually taking photos and images. So by creating this studio, creating this side operation, I've actually spent less time in the last year taking the images I want to take than I would have done if I'd remained a hobbyist or an enthusiast, even though I have this studio space available to me all the time. So if you're going to go professional, you have to be prepared to spend just as much time taking images, actually probably more time than taking images, doing accounts, marketing, building websites, making professional connections, getting your name out there in order just to get people in through the door. And that doesn't matter what genre you're going into for that. You're going to have to put that work in. So if that work is something you don't enjoy, or you don't think you'll enjoy, but you're perfectly happy with your employed position, then perhaps it would make more sense to consider staying where you are and just doing what you want to do in your time that you have available. So using all of your spare time for photography, if that's what you want. Now, another key point is you think you're going to be your own boss and you're going to create all these images that you love. But actually, if you're going to try and make some money out of this and be professional, and no matter what genre you're going into, you're never really going to be your own boss because you are creating images for other people's purposes. Now, don't get me wrong, you're going to have some creative input into that. You're going to make the decisions on how things go, and in a lot of cases, they're going to trust you entirely about how you make the images. But ultimately, you're going to put yourself under the pressure to deliver them for them when they want them, when they need them, and to meet their brief. So your creativity is going to be a lot more curtailed than it is as an amateur or hobbyist photographer who's just doing it for the hell of it. The notes even go to more than one page. So there's the pressure there for clients. I mean, I stopped taking photos in December around about I think my last session was the 8th or the 9th of December, because there was that huge pressure there to get people's photos back to them for Christmas and the editing. And one of the things that you have to do as a professional when you're working for other people is you have to compromise on the quality of the work you deliver. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive, because you think, well, obviously as a professional you will have all this time in order to create these perfect and beautiful images. Well, actually no. If you do, as I did in November, a ridiculously large number of shoots, and the clients are waiting for those images and they need them back by a certain time, and Christmas is looming and the prints have got to be ready, you probably have to make some compromises in the editing process. If I'm doing portraits for my own purposes, I will do the basic edit in Lightroom, I will sync it across the set, and then I will go into Photoshop and I will do some quite intricate and delicate retouching of the portraits to get them exactly how I want to do. Now, if you've got 15 people that are all expecting 40 images from you, fully ready and retouched to be developed and edited, then you're going to have to make some compromises. You have to develop techniques within a program like Lightroom that you can sync across that allow you to do things like retouch and edit the eyes quicker and simpler. You won't have the time that a hobbyist or an enthusiast has to devote to getting things exactly the way they want them, because it's not your time scale you're working to, it's the client's. So in some ways, as a professional, you have to compromise your standards more than you would as an enthusiast or a hobbyist. And then there's the big things, really. First of all, before you decide to go professional, you need to think, is there a market out there for your work? Just because your work's excellent doesn't mean that there is some way to make a living from it. So, I mean, see a lot of people who do fantastic landscapes who want to become professional landscape photographers. They see a lot of people like Thomas Heaton on YouTube and think, well, if he can make a living at it, then so can I. But I would argue that most landscape photographers do not make a living from being a landscape photographer. Thomas Heaton's a good example. Thomas Heaton will say himself in his videos that he's a professional YouTuber. If it wasn't for YouTube, he wouldn't be able to go out and do his landscape photography. An awful lot of other landscape photographers, this probably goes for street photographers as well, make their living from running workshops. So you have to ask yourself, are you willing to spend a significant portion of your time teaching other people how to do what you do, rather than actually doing what you do? The idea that you're going to sell a book and make lots and lots of money from that book is difficult. It's very difficult, at least, and it's a much harder task than you might think, and probably one that's easier to pursue as a hobbyist or part-time photographer than it is as a professional photographer who actually needs the photography to put food in their mouths. If you look at the likes of Sean Tucker on YouTube, he does a book every year, his collections. Now, I'm not going to knock Sean's photography in any way, shape or form, but if he wasn't a YouTuber first, I dare say it would be an awful lot harder for him to sell those books. And he sells those books to sort of support his channel, and it's a circle. He's as much a YouTuber as he is a photographer. Now, I don't know everything about, obviously, Sean Tucker's life and his finances and things like that, but it's clearly a significant part of what he's doing. So you have to ask yourself, can I make a living directly from doing what I want to do, or will I have to do something else to support it anyway? And if that something else isn't going to be more enjoyable than the current job you have, then you might as well stick with the current job that you have, especially if it earns you a more stable, ongoing living. I mean, I do what I suppose you would term retail photography, in that I do family portraits, headshots for actors and small businesses, a little bit of small business commercial stuff. That's the stuff I can fit in with my lifestyle, and that's why I've chosen that. I'll do the family stuff a little bit on weekends. I usually do them on mornings and don't work on the afternoons, so I can spend time with my own family. I'll do bits and pieces on an evening. Because I own the business in which I'm an independent financial advisor, I can fit in a few headshots during the day and things like that, so I have a lot of flexibility in my life. But some genres are going to affect your life significantly. For example, wedding photographers. A lot of people think about wedding photography when they're first going professional because they know people spend a decent amount of money on wedding photography, and they know that there is a market out there. People are always getting married. There's also the attraction that you're only working weekends most of the time. You've got the full week to do editing, and that sounds like a nice setup. But if you've got a young family, you're never going to see them. You're never going to be able to spend the weekend with them. You're always going to be busy if you're actually making a decent living at it. Commercial work, it's extremely hard to break into. You'd have to put a lot of work into establishing your brand of photography and getting it out there. And I would suggest that if you're willing to rent a small space, that you've got the space to work, you could probably do that just as effectively as a hobbyist to begin with, as long as you know you could find the time if you actually landed that decent client to go off and do the work. I think there's no right or wrong answer really. For me, I'm not prepared to go full-time professional, just because I make a reasonably good living at a job I enjoy. It allows me the freedom and the time to do the photography in the way that I would like to do it. Now, I've made some mistakes this year. One of them, bizarrely, is not shooting for free, which I'm going to talk about in the next video. Now, it's not for me to tell you whether you should or shouldn't become a professional. That only you can decide that. All I wanted to do in this video really was highlight to you the pros and cons of it and get you thinking about it. You can kill some of the joy of photography when you start bringing money into the mix. It becomes much harder. But equally, if you're not enjoying what you're actually doing to earn a living, then why not? Anyway, in the next video, I'm going to talk about something that I made a bit of a mistake this year, and it's made me a bit sad about the photography and sucked a little bit of the life out of it, and I'm changing it moving forwards. So maybe give it a watch. Speak to you soon. Take care.